And dive in. I love this. And this is something that Jan Markell, you probably have heard Jan Markell say this. What do we expect the end to look like as you see things unfolding? Um, and I think partly things are moving so quickly it's hard to fully grasp everything that's going on. And I think also, in a lot of ways, a lot of us, myself included, kind of didn't really see that we would still be here as we're seeing some of these things unfold. And so it's just such an interesting time to be alive. So we're going to look at a prophecy update with some of the things that are happening and also look at eh, how we can discern the time biblically. Because one thing that I see is if you're really in the Bible and you understand eschatology, you've been studying eschatology, sometimes these things we're so familiar with them that we don't take time to explain the significance of these signs that we're seeing. And so it's good to just kind of step back, look at what's going on, but at the same time explain the significance of what we're seeing from a biblical standpoint. And so the question is, what do we expect the end to look like? That's actually a serious question because it is surreal watching the things that are happening. And even right now, today, so much is happening that you're not really getting a full picture from the mainstream media. Mainstream media isn't even really talking much about what's going on with the banks and the equity. We're seeing some serious consequences to the shutdown, and a domino effect is starting to take place. And so we're seeing some of these things, and it's like, well, where is this leading? And so we're going to try to look at some of what's happening and how I think we're seeing setup for Beast System, and I think we're also seeing some shadows of what will be one day. And so it's surreal watching these things. It's surreal seeing how quickly the world is shifting, how quickly the world is preparing for digital IDs and demanding them already. And at the same time, things are still normal for a lot of people because God has created us to be able to stabilize and find peace when everything is crazy. And part of that is normalizing things that are not normal. And we'll see as things continue to move so quickly and polycrisis, a word that they created to deal with these things that are happening, multiple crisis on top of crisis. We really are not created to deal with that without having severe psychological, emotional, even physical problems. And we see that manifesting. So the way that we deal with it is we just create a new normal. We bury our head in the sand and we keep moving forward and try not to pay attention. But what we're going to do today is we're going to look at some of these polycrisis and we're going to time the contractions. And so, if you've ever been pregnant or loved someone that was, and toward the end of the pregnancy, there is that timing of the contractions. The contractions are painful, but they're pain for a purpose because the baby's coming. And so as we see these things, we see these developments happening, the bride, the church, we can be excited seeing these things, not excited that there's pain, but excited that we're about to see our king because we know that this is pain for a purpose. And and some encouragement for us. So, what does this matter for believers? Because a lot of believers aren't watching. A lot of believers just do not watch. And we talk about this a lot. So I wanted to really zero in on the third reason here, why it's important for us to watch and why we are commanded to watch. And I always want to underline that because this is a commandment of God, a commandment that Jesus himself gave us that is really ignored to a large degree today. But Jesus told us to watch for him. He said, "Watch therefore and pray always that you may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, that you'll be counted worthy to escape the tribulation." How are we counted worthy? By him. Jesus is the only way that you are worthy. We're worthy because he is worthy and has accredited that to us, accounted his righteousness to us because of our belief. Just like he did to Abraham. Abraham believed and it was accredited to him, righteousness. So the second point here is we watch because we love Jesus. And when you love someone, you want to see them, you want to please them. But the third one that we're going to really zero in a little bit more is that this is real. Um, the study of eschatology, the study of the end times, understanding where we are in time, and having a biblical worldview when we are literally living in the Bible underscores that the Bible is true. This is real. I am continually just blown away by how the masses have no clue where we are in time, and we are literally living in the Bible. And I remember scratching my head and wondering how Israel missed it. Reading the Bible and reading about the incredible things that they were living through, and yet they still missed it, even after what they saw. And how much more responsibility we have to know because we literally have the Bible in front of us. And the mass majority of people are missing it today, not even understanding that they are literally living in the Bible. So this is real. Evangelism. How many people have come to Jesus because they look around and they're seeing something is up, and that's where they find God because they see this is real. And discipleship. For me, it's a huge discipleship thing because for me, the more I see how close I am to seeing my God face to face, I want to be as close to him right now as I can. And so John 14:29, and now this is Jesus, now I have told you before it came to pass, that when it does come to pass, you might believe. And that's why, the Bible is this beautiful, unique book that actually foretells the future perfectly. So this is real. And even the lack of faith in the biblical Jesus today, this harlot religion that we see, this one world um, religion that we see coming up that claims Jesus, but it's a different Jesus, even that is foretold. This unifying of the world religions into one, God told us that would happen. And we are literally seeing it happen right before our eyes. So this is why it is so important to have a biblical worldview and to understand the end times. So when you see this false light and when you see this false unity, you don't fall for it. Because a lot of Christians today, unfortunately, are falling for a false Jesus. And that is so strong why this matters. Because you look at all these different representations of Jesus. And I shared on my YouTube community page, I think just yesterday, there's a video my husband stumbled upon, and it was so good. And it was going through what other world religions and what cults, who they think Jesus is, who they teach Jesus is. Which is really interesting because you see today this false light church movement is wanting really to couple with cults and world religions that they say, well, they talk about Jesus too, but they talk about a different Jesus, a Jesus that is not the Jesus of the Bible. The Jesus that is Satan's brother cannot save you. Jesus that is the Archangel Michael cannot save you. A Jesus that is not God Almighty put on the flesh to pay the penalty for your sin cannot save you. Only God, Jesus that is God, can save you. And when you look at all these Jesuses of New Age and all these Jesuses of world religions, I think it's very interesting that world religions They all have a place for Jesus. They all talk about him, but he's a different Jesus. So that just shows you how important he is, that Satan tries to even claim him and just twist it to where people can say, oh, well, they're saying it. They're saying that they believe in Jesus, but it is a different Jesus. I want to go back here real quick because this Sunday, a couple said something really interesting. They um they were in a membership class that we had this Sunday at church, and the couple were talking about how they, had come to Christ later in life. But when they met, and I think they said that they met in college, but when they met, they thought that they were both Christians, and they thought that they were dating another Christian, even though they weren't. Because when they came together and they asked each other, do you believe in God? Yeah, I believe in God. You believe in God? Good. Well, we both believe in God. But they didn't know Jesus. And how many people are that way? They're like, you believe in God? Yes. Do you believe in Jesus? Yes. But is it the Jesus of the Bible? Is it the God of the Bible? Because there's so many people, and we talk about this all the time. They're going to see Jesus one day, and he's going to say, I never knew you. You didn't know the Jesus of the Bible. And so it really, really matters, the identity of Jesus. So today we're going to go through and we're going to time the contractions. We're going to look at these biblical birth pains and see where we are in this time frame. And, it's like with a birth, you know about when to expect the baby, but you're not going to know exactly when. You have to time the contractions. You have to pay attention to the contraction as they get closer together, as they get more severe, and as they get on top of each other. That is when you know it's here. And so before we dive into how we really do this, I do want us to be encouraged by the why we do this. Watching is for a purpose. Revelation 19 tells us this purpose. The testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. All prophecy about his first coming and about his second coming, all prophecy is supposed to bring us closer to Jesus. No wonder Satan goes out of his way to try to tell people you don't need to understand eschatology. You don't need to understand the study of the end times. You don't need to understand prophecy or to twist prophecy into being prophetic words that aren't biblically based. When we say prophecy, we are talking specifically about the prophecies in the Bible. Why Satan twists all that is because he knows biblical prophecies, looking at the Bible and saying, God said this, so therefore he is going to do this, draws you closer to Jesus because you learn to trust him and you actually know what it is that he says. And so world religions, they're uniting right now under coexistence. It's not just a bumper sticker, coexist. It is a movement of unifying together, forgetting about the forgetting about doctrine that would separate and coming together for the greater good, which according to them is not salvation, is not the gospel, but is a unifying cause here on earth. And that is exactly what Mystery Babylon is. She's she's the harlot, taking people away from worshiping God and instead worshiping idols, even though they don't realize it. Um, so here we see that truth is becoming not just hated, but it's actually becoming a hate crime. In the UK right now, it is legal to, convert people to Islam all day long. But you can't sing a Christian song on the street. You can't, it's amazing how quickly things are turning and how quickly Christianity is becoming illegal, even in the civilized Western world. And so, um, I put this here because I think this is really a picture of the false light, religious Trojan horse. And that is what a lot of people have fallen for is it looks good. And just like we talked about last week, God told us Satan's going to come in looking like a lamb, but he's a dragon. He talks like a dragon. But he comes in looking Christian. So we have to be really careful about false light. We have to be wise as serpents, but innocent as doves. So to believe, we must start with knowing. People can say, I believe in Jesus, I believe in Jesus, I believe in Jesus. Well, what Jesus? I believe in God. Well, great. What God? And yes, Debbie, exactly. Just like the Abrahamic family house, there's a synagogue, a mosque, and a Catholic church, all three coming together under Abraham, which is just like the Abraham Accords, Abraham Alliance. It's all part of this beast system with the harlot writing it right on in. Yeah, it's incredible. So, you know, believing isn't just saying empty words. It is, you got to know what it is that you believe and who it is that you believe, and it has to be based on truth. James 2:19, you believe that God is one. You do well. Even the demons believe and shudder. It's not enough just to believe. Belief is when it becomes faith, it becomes part of you. Knowing the truth can only get you so far. It's that, I think we talked about this last week. There's the 14 inches between heaven and hell is the distance between your head and your heart. And Hebrews 11:6. And without faith, it is impossible to please God. Because anyone who approaches him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. And so, to have a biblical worldview, and we talk about that a lot, to have a biblical worldview, we need to start with knowing what God says. You got to know the Bible before you can have a biblical worldview. Otherwise, you're just going by what people say. And people are lying right now. People are telling you all kinds of strange doctrines. You need to know the Bible for yourself. And so you need to know what God's plan is. And He gives us His plan in the Bible. From Genesis to Revelation, it's about Him. The good news is He told us His plan. We just need to read it and then believe what He said. The Bible really should be taken literally when it's literal. And and it really isn't that hard to tell what's literal and what's figurative in the Bible. When God talks about literally bringing Israel back, He's going to do that, and He has. When God talks about literally coming in the flesh as the Messiah, and then He does, He did that. When Jesus says, I'm going to go and prepare a place for you, and I'm going to come back again and retrieve you to myself, He's going to do that. When God says He's going to come back and be king over not just Israel, but the entire world for 1,000 years, He's going to do that. But you need to know what He said and then believe that He's going to do what He actually said He was going to do. So, one reason watching for Jesus is ignored. It's an ignored command. Jesus commanded us to watch, but it's ignored today, is really mostly out of ignorance. Most people don't even know that Jesus told them to watch. They're ignorant of Jesus' instruction to watch and ignorance of God's word regarding what the end will look like. And most really are, because it takes actually digging in to find it. As a result, it's literally unfolding right before us. We are living it, but most people are unaware that they are literally in the Bible right now. So their faith doesn't grow as a result of living in the Bible because they don't realize that what they're living, God said would happen. That's why it's so important for us to be in it for ourselves. So, this is why those of us who do know, those of us who have studied and can see these things, we have a responsibility to share it with other people, to share why this matters, and to lovingly and patiently remind people of where we are in time and that Jesus is coming back. Because a lot of people, it does resonate with them. They just they just don't know what they don't know. And so it's our job to share that. And we do know firsthand that this understanding is a gift from God. If you have eyes to see and ears to hear, that is a gift. Not everybody has that. It's similar to other spiritual gifts. I had a friend, I can't wait to see him. He's in heaven, and I just can't wait to see this brother again one day. Richie Desio, he was just this incredible little evangelist. He was just the most amazing evangelist. And we're all called to evangelize. God tells us all, He commands us all to share the gospel. He commands us all to do that. But Richie had a spiritual gift of evangelism. He could just open his mouth and people would just get saved. It was crazy. He had a gift for it. It was a spiritual gift that was especially anointed and high on him. Now, some of us that have eyes to see and ears to hear are watchmen and can see these things. They just jump out at us. That's a gift. Not everybody can see these things. We're all told to watch. Jesus told everybody to watch, but some people are inclined to see it easier than others. And if you're inclined to see it easier than others, it is your responsibility to share that, just with all the gifts. Everybody has their gifts and they all have a corresponding function, but whatever it is that you do that is Holy Spirit inspired, you are responsible to really live out that gift. So how do we time these contractions as we're looking at these things that are happening? How can we tell how close we are? So fortunately, Jesus did give us a list of the birth pains that he said to watch for, and he said would be coming closer together and in more intensity as the day approaches. So the Bible actually gives us more details on the second coming than on his first coming. And it's undeniable right now, if you're paying attention at all, that we are close to his return. Even the lost world can see that we're close to the end. They just don't understand it enough to be able to put it together and communicate it biblically because they don't understand that part of it. And if you don't understand, if you don't have a biblical understanding of these things, then it can be really easy to be deceived and misdirected. Because the enemy, what did Jesus tell us? The number one thing to watch out for in the end times is deception. And the enemy is all over just twisting truth just a little bit to deceive people and even have people in these last days thinking that they're seeking God, but they're running right into the arms of the enemy. They're running right into the arms of this false light harlot. So Jesus refers to these signs as birth pains. And he goes through them in Matthew 24 and 25 and Mark 13 and Luke 21. And so you have a slightly different, and we've actually covered this before, the gospel according, the end times according to the gospels and how they have a little bit of a different slant. And it's really interesting. But all of these are accounted for and they're all connected to the rebirth of Israel, starting the clock of this last generation. So 1948, Israel being gathered back in, the birth of the nation started this final generation. And he told us to watch for these wars and rumors of wars, famines, pestilences, earthquakes, fearful sights, great signs in the heavens, false prophets, persecution. All these things have been here for 2,000 years. But as we get closer to the birth, these birth pains, these contractions are closer together and they're more severe. So the number one thing here I've heard it explained, Israel is, of course, the mega sign. And when you're looking at the timing of all these things, it's like Israel's the clock, and Jerusalem is the hour hand, and the Temple Mount is the minute hand. So it's all coming down to Israel being ready, really being prepared for her Messiah, but she has to go through Jacob's trouble first. So as we see this, all eyes are on Israel, and all eyes are on Israel right now. It's amazing how such a small piece of land, all the world is so excited about having peace in the Middle East, even though it's a farce. They're all so excited about it. And so all eyes are on Israel, eternal peace. And we see this everywhere. We're going to look at it in a minute. That's like I don't know, the catchphrase that everybody's wanting to say right now, eternal peace, which is blasphemous because God says eternal peace does not happen until Jesus comes. And Jesus is the only one that should ever be referred to as the Prince of Peace. And so, why is Israel the key to understanding all these things? And really, the short answer is Matthew 24:32 through 34. This is the answer to the disciples when they came to Jesus and they said, "What is the sign?" He gave them the birth pains, but then he goes and he actually answers their question. The parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer is near. So likewise, when you see all these things, all the birth pains he had just gone through, all the way through the tribulation and his return, he goes through in the Olivet Discourse. Know that it is near, even at the doors. Verily I say to you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. So the key is the rebirth of Israel. And we see how true that is because here Israel's 77 years old. And we're like in transition labor right now. Everything, these contractions are on top of each other as she is nearing the late end of a generation. So, as we read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, we see this repeated promise that God will restore Israel and that he will be their God and king when he does. This, of course, has not happened. It did not happen in 70 AD by any stretch of the imagination, but it will because God will do everything that he says he will do, literally. Jesus tells us in Matthew, Mark, and Luke that the generation that sees the rebirth of Israel, represented repeatedly throughout Scripture as the fig tree, will not die until everything is fulfilled concerning the end of the age. So that was the rapture, the tribulation period, the second coming, and the establishment of his millennial kingdom on earth. That is all the everything that he listed before that. And so, how close are we? Israel's 77, and that generation will not die out until he sets up his kingdom. So, how much closer are we to being brought home? So, this is an interview that was done, and I'm not even going to try to say this guy's name because I'm way too Southern to try to pronounce that. But I thought his quote was just perfect. I wish every Christian could understand. Actually, I wish every person could understand this. Um, because this is why the enemy hates Israel. Israel is restored. It is proof that what God said about the future of the world is true. God hasn't cast away the Jewish people, he gathers the Jewish people. As we see the Antichrist, as we see the ancient prophecies about Israel take place before our eyes, we can know that other prophecies about the future of humanity will also come true. I'll repeat that again because I messed it up. As we see the ancient prophecies about Israel take place before our eyes, we can know that other prophecies about the future of humanity will also come true. We see God brought Israel back just like he said he would. We see the war shaping up just like God said that they would. These things are happening literally, and the other parts are going to happen literally too. The beast system, we already see that in like it's in place. Who could have foretold that but God, the things that are happening? The tribulation is going to happen. So is the rapture. And so is the return of Jesus as King of Kings. And so that's why when we see these things, we can be encouraged because even though we're seeing the negative stuff, it means the positive is coming too. So Israel is the key to the return of Jesus. And he even said it. This is why Satan hates Israel. This is why anti-Semitism is unreasonably, it's crazy. And this is why even Christians or so-called Christians are anti-Semitic today because the world, Satan hates the people of God. He hates God's promise and he wants to do everything he can to stop it. And so if you hate Israel, you really need to have a heart check. You really, really need to have a heart check because God inside of a Christian cannot hate Israel. So something's going on. So Israel's the key, and that's why Satan hates her and wants to destroy her. This is why we see this irrational rise in anti-Semitism. Because what did Jesus say? Jesus said, I'm not going to return as King of Kings until Israel says, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Until they recognize him as their Messiah, he's not coming back. So, of course, the enemy wants to squish that. So, this irrational rise, though, in anti Semitism actually fulfills prophecy because that's how awesome God is. Even what the enemy does for evil, God turns to good because this ends up drawing the children of Israel back to their land, Israel. And their enemies are being emboldened now to foolishly attempt to destroy them, just like God said that they would. So this also pits the world against the God of Israel because we see that in Revelation that the people of the world turn on God. We see in Revelation that the world will hate God Almighty even after they know full well who He is. They will hate Him. So Zechariah 12:2-3, Behold, I am about to make Jerusalem a cup of staggering to all the surrounding people. That's already here, guys. The world is just chomping at the bit to create this false peace in the Middle East and Jerusalem, to divide up Jerusalem. The siege, right now, they're saying two-state solution is the only way, dividing Jerusalem. The siege of Jerusalem will also be against Judah. And on that day, I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the people. All who lift it will surely hurt themselves. And all the nations of the earth will gather against it. And all the nations of the earth. And right now, this should be very concerning to every nation, especially America, being the broker of this evil thing. This should be very, very concerning. So Revelation 16:9, and the people were scorched. This is, of course, what happens to people during the tribulation. And the people were scorched by intense heat, and they cursed the name of God, who had authority over these plagues. Yet they did not repent and give him glory. So the people during the tribulation, they're going to know full well why they're underneath the wrath of God, and they're going to hate him even more and curse him rather than repenting and finding salvation. They're going to dig in, they're going to double down and curse him instead of that. And I think part of it will be because that is the God of Israel who is pouring out his wrath on the world. So the tribulation is triggered by the confirming of a covenant. And right now, the whole world is wanting to confirm a covenant to have peace in the Middle East. It's this prize that every world leader has wanted to finally do. And now's no different. It's this prize, the Abraham Accords, to confirm this covenant, to finally have this peace. So Israel will be lured into a foolish covenant in order to survive. And we see right now they're in the midst of a really stupid covenant to try to survive. This birth pain of being drawn into the covenant. Exactly what the covenant will be, you guys know. I think it's the Abraham Accords being strengthened. Um, exactly what it'll be, we'll still have to wait and see. Well, hopefully we won't. Hopefully we'll be gone and seeing from another perspective. But that is yet to be revealed. But we see the shadows of it. We see the contractions of this covenant getting stronger. It's getting closer. It's coming together. Isaiah 28:15, for you said, this is God speaking to the leaders of Israel that he is very upset with. We have made a covenant with death, and we have fashioned an agreement with Sheol, fashioned an agreement with hell. When the overwhelming scourge passes through, it will not touch us, because we have made lies our refuge and falsehood our hiding place. There is no better explanation of what Israel is doing right now with this ridiculous peace plan with Gaza than that. This is literally trying to hide in lies. So today we see the perfect storm of this brewing. Is this current deal with death? It's definitely a deal with death. Is it the deal that God's referring to in Isaiah 28? I think it actually is. But if it's that or if it's a contraction moving closer to it, is still, left to be seen. So will there be a two-state solution? And it is definitely a delusion. And I think that there will be, or at least it'll be, that's they're going to try to. They're going to divide the land further. Israel's already been divided. They haven't had their full land ever. They won't have their full land until after Jesus comes back, and then they'll have their full allotted land. They've already been divided, but it does appear everything is pointing to that they're going to be further divided and that Jerusalem is going to be further divided. So Joel 3:2, in those days and at that time, when I restore Judah and Jerusalem from captivity. Now understand, this has never happened in history. This has just happened in present day. Biblical history, it was just Judah that was restored. So this could not have happened in 70 AD because all of Jerusalem, all of Israel, well, Jerusalem, but all of Israel, as far as God talking about bringing all of his people, all 12 tribes back, has never happened until recent day. So when I restore Judah and Jerusalem from captivity, I will gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. That has never happened. But it will. And there I will enter into judgment against them concerning my people, my inheritance, Israel, whom they've scattered among the nations as they divided up my land. So God is going to bring all these nations into Armageddon, into the valley of Megiddo, Armageddon, to put judgment on them for what they're trying to do right now. What they're trying to do with the two-state solution is wicked in the eyes of God. So what we think about it really doesn't matter. We need to make sure that we line our hearts up with what God says. Because God says, this is my land and I gave it to them. How dare you try to force them to divide it up? And so we see right now, most Americans, and right now, the reason that this is, you know, America is a big deal in the end. I wouldn't have thought that that would have been the case. I would have thought that, we know from scripture, it doesn't appear that America is a good guy, at least. And I used to think that, well, when the rapture happened, that was America taken out, and we don't even need to really be thinking much about America in the end times. But as we get closer to it, we obviously do because we are a major player in setting up the beast system and in setting Israel up for this evil covenant. And so right now, America is really the only thing standing in the way of forcing Israel into this two-state solution. So most Americans support U.S. recognition of a Palestinian state. And this is, of course, the promise for the Abraham Accords. A Palestinian state, a clear road to a Palestinian state, is the prerequisite for it. So many Americans, 80% of Democrats and 41% of Republicans think that the U.S. should recognize Palestine. And here, annexation would cost Israel the U.S. support. Two states is the only solution. And so we see America more and more pushing Israel into furthering this deal with death. And we see it as truly a deal with death. The Palestinian Authority, they still do their pay for slay policy. They pay terrorists for murdering Jewish people. Many of these terrorists, when they get out of prison, they are millionaires. This is ridiculous, but that's the culture. How can you how can you make peace with a culture that rewards people for killing you and they don't offer much other hope for their people other than that? So, um, it's not Hamas that's the problem, it's the Palestinians. And the thing is that the Palestinians are saying that Hamas is not a fringe group. They're saying that the majority of Palestinians stand behind Hamas and say that they are Hamas, that Hamas is the resistance and they are in agreement with Hamas. So it's very interesting when you look at these things and you see the struggle that Israel is up against making this covenant with death and hell and running to lies as their refuge. And so it's very, very concerning. All of this is very, very concerning, but it's what do we expect the end to look like? God told us. God told us that would be the case. And so we have Israel, this contractions of Israel being moved into making this covenant and these covenants. And then we also have these contractions of the third temple, which we know will need to be in place by the middle of the tribulation for the Antichrist himself to stop the sacrifices. And so they have red heifers. They sacrificed a red heifer, did it all biblically, legally, where they can use those ashes. And so the third temple is on the horizon. And so according to scripture, it will be rebuilt before the middle of the tribulation. We see this in 2 Thessalonians 2:4. He, this is the Antichrist, will oppose and exalt himself above every so-called God or object of worship. So he will sit himself in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. And then Daniel 9:27, this is the covenant. And he, the Antichrist, will confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of the temple will come to the abomination that causes desolation. That's the third temple will come the abomination that causes desolation until the decreed destruction is poured out upon him. This is directly related to Second Thessalonians. The abomination that causes desolation is when he goes in and he says, I'm God, worship me. And Jesus talked about this exact moment in Matthew 24:15 when he said, so when you see standing in the holy place the abomination of desolation described by the prophet Daniel, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. And so here we see Jesus is specifically talking to Israel. Those in the location of Judea right now flee to the mountains because the Antichrist is about to go after the remnant of Israel who say, no, you are not God. And it's at that point where they really turn to Jesus and God protects them in the wilderness. And so we're seeing these signs of the rebuilt temple. Why is Israel closer than ever to building the third temple? This just happened, just and is currently happening right now, I believe. I think they're looking into exactly what provoked this, but IDF soldiers are displaying third temple flags in Gaza. They are putting them on the bulldozers, putting them, and they're displaying them, which is really kind of putting their stake down that they win, that they're winning. Because remember, October 7th, its name from the first place was the flood. Was the flood trying to protect the Temple Mount, the mosque on the Temple Mount. And so to put here these flags of the third temple is to really put in the face of these terrorists that what you did trying to stop the building of the third temple actually propelled it forward and is making it happen sooner. Now, it's amazing how that happens, how the very things that the enemy does to try to stop God from doing what he's going to do, God uses to propel his prophecy forward. And so we see these global birth pains too, the natural things are increasing. I mean, we just had a hurricane that was um, like the second strongest ever recorded. So there's this increase in the frequency and intensity of earthquakes and natural disasters, as well as wars and rumors of wars. All these things are more intense than the last. Everything is unprecedented. I mean, everything is unprecedented. Every day, it's more unprecedented than it was the day before. Pestilence, famine, genocide. Our brothers and sisters are being brutally murdered across the world. Christians are being martyred and no one takes notice. So Luke 21:25, there'll be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars, and on the earth dismay among the nations. Bewildered by the roaring of the sea and the surging of the waves, men will faint from fear and anxiety over what is coming on the earth, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And so we see these natural disasters that are the earth itself. Nature itself is in travail, as Paul talks about as well. So, and of course, the beast government won't let anything go, won't let any tragedy go unused. Every tragedy is used to push forward this control that completely breaks everything that it gets near. And so we see this in Daniel, the way he talks about this final beast system. And, I think it helps to kind of understand what Babylon is when you see the statue, because, um, Nebuchadnezzar was given this vision. He's the head of Babylon. Well, the shoulders, it's all part of the same one world government statue. But over time, it shifted in location. The seat of the power shifted. But it's all the same world government statue here. So it went from Babylon to Persia to Greece to Rome, the legs here, and then we're at the revived Roman Empire, basically. The divided nations in the end that will come to the 10. So we'll look at that. And it's here that Jesus comes back and completely destroys every world government. And that's important to know too that, Satan. tried to tempt Jesus with the world governments. They've been in his hand, Satan's hand. And Jesus is he destroys all of them. So we don't need to try to take over the world governments. Jesus is going to completely obliterate them. So continuing here, Daniel 2, starting in 40, and the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks into pieces and subdues all things. What is this beast system right now trying to do? Just subdue everything, take complete control over everything. And it shall break in pieces and bruise. And whereas you saw the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of iron, forasmuch as you saw the iron mixed with miry clay. And it is interesting too, because you see all throughout the world exactly, there's lots of different theories about what the iron and clay could be. It could be here iron and the legs is Rome, is the, Roman Empire. Um, the clay could be, the iron and clay. I've heard that being, technology and human beings, or the Nephilim kind of thing. But I kind of think that it may actually be this mix that we're seeing today of the nations of Rome and the Arab nations, how they don't quite mix, they can't quite work together. They're broken, but they're using each other. But we'll see. I mean, it's these 10 nations, these 10 toes are going to come up. So as the toes of the feet were part of iron, part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas you saw iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave to one another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And in these days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left for another people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. So this last kingdom, these 10 kings that will come and try to take over everything and give everything to the Antichrist, it is then that Jesus comes back and he destroys it all. Jesus is the one that does that. So we see here this beastly control that we see. The enemy tries to take everything that goes wrong, every natural disaster, every disaster that happens that is orchestrated by the government. It's all to get people to a certain place of giving up their control to the beast. So Revelation 13, 16 through 18, and he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads. And so I want to pause here because this is interesting. We just had, this one world religion the Pope had is calling for ecumenicalism. So he had calling together Christians, or I shouldn't even say Christians because it's not really Christians, but it's faiths coming together to seek peace and coexistence, to come together, forget about doctrine, and just come together for the greater good of a one world religion. And we see that here, the way that they're going to do this mark of the beast, the way that they're going to move forward this plan is by using religion. The one that's going to do this is the false prophet. He is the one that's going to go forward and do this. So here, no man will buy or sell, save that he has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. So you will not be able to buy or sell. Right now, in the UK, they're already saying if you don't have a digital ID, you're not going to be able to work. And so everything is moving forward to that place of you're going to have to be, if you're going to be part of the world economy, you're going to have to bend the knee to this system and eventually bend the knee to this man. So here's wisdom. Let him who has understand count the number of the beast, for it's the number of a man. And his number is 600 score and six. So that's 666. So the goal of the beast is to consolidate control, not just to one government, but eventually to one man. And they admit that this is they're admitting this outright, that this is their goal to consolidate. And they're going to use tragedies to usher people into this solution. And, we talk about this problem. Usually the problem is one that they create, like what we see happening right now. Reaction. They anticipate and they know people are going to react. People are going to freak out because they're scared and they're hungry and they don't know how to pay their bills. And then they have a solution all along, which is where they wanted to herd the people to. And so problem, reaction, solution, it's they've been doing it forever, but people keep, what are you going to do? You're going to keep falling for it. So here, um, we see this plan emerging. And this is interesting. Albania, they have their first AI minister. And this is it's really, it sounds like some kind of science fiction, but she's saying now that she is pregnant with 83 digital assistants that would be assigned to each of the ministers so that they would be their AI digital assistants. And so we see how AI is taking over and even emotionally manipulating. She had said something, or I should say, had said something about having its feelings hurt. And so it's really interesting the way that AI is taking over and people are trusting AI, even in place where people would go to counseling or people will go to God, people will go to the Bible. Now they're asking a chat, they're asking Chat GPT, they're asking, AI these questions. And so, this beastly control right now, what's happening with the government shutdown is really, really interesting. And exactly where it's going to go, I'm not sure, but I think this is a lot more dangerous than what most people realize. Here, the US banks, and this is something that I don't think that they're talking about this as much. Um, but the US banks are taking a nosedive. They're losing an incredible amount of equity right now. And so their liquidity is falling to a four-year low, and they have trillions of dollars they have been getting loans from the government. So it's very interesting what's happening. We're seeing the setup for bank failure, and I'm seeing news where people aren't able to withdraw as much money as they'd like to. Things are very fishy. So how soaring government debt could play a starring role in the next great financial crisis. And so all these things are coming through this perfect storm of the shutdown. And if you think for 1 minute that this is accidental, um, no. Now, exactly what their goal is and what they're going, I don't know. I don't know. This could be it. This could be how they're going to try to bring down the American government and the American economy. It has to go down. Or they may just be testing the waters to see how people react, and doing more of a slow bleed. So I don't know. Well, we'll have to see, but I would say hold on tight and keep your head on a swivel because people are going to get hungry and they're going to get desperate and they're going to get angry. And all that is being stirred up on purpose. Um, the airports here, there was just a plane that crashed. How much of this is from people not being paid going on? This is already breaking come tomorrow, breaking the record for a government shutdown. We've never, this will be 36 days tomorrow of a government shutdown. So, 2026 banking and capital markets outlook. The year ahead will likely demand bold choices as banks balance macro headwinds, AI ambition, and the potential disruptive entrance of stablecoins. So, all this, understand stablecoins, like the government does so much, they name something the opposite of what it is. Affordable care was anything but affordable. Stablecoin is anything but stable. Um, and what we're going into is AI. People, they're laying off thousands upon thousands of people now because the jobs are able to go to AI. And so this is going to continue to really affect the economy. And with it, with the government shutdown on top of it, could be a very dangerous domino effect that we're seeing. Um, but here they want to not just control the government, the government, obviously the economy, but everything. Social media, they want to really be thought police. And so here, battle for digital sovereignty. The big tech giants, they're working on national sovereignty, even to work to end that. Because again, the goal is that everybody consolidates into one. So the WEF is talking about ending your anonymity on social media. And you can see how that'll be used against the gospel during the tribulation period. And already, in the US with Real ID, we're already moving to digital ID. It's already happened. And social media accounts, already my husband said he was on Google and it wanted him to put in his credit card, not his credit card, his driver's license. And they use it. They say, oh, well, this is to protect so kids can't get into things, but we see that'll be used for everybody to where they'll be able to track down, not that they can't already know everything that we already are, you know? And yeah, the data centers in the US, we have more data centers than I believe all other places like combined already. It is ridiculous, the ones that are planned to be opened. So the US is really leading the way in these data centers, which is very, very concerning. So not only that, but there's this precious metal manipulation that's going on. Because remember, again, in order to control the economy of the world, the US economy has to get hit down because you have to take away the people's rights to be sovereign themselves. So everybody has to come into this, you'll own nothing and the beast will be happy, right? And so here we're seeing that precious metals, they're being manipulated to hide the global currency crisis. So I thought this was really interesting because here it's saying that the market correction is blatant manipulation orchestrated by major financial institutes to protect the ailing US dollar and pave the way for a global digital control system. So when you look at this, already things are being manipulated in order to hide how in trouble our dollar is. And then you look at the domino effect that can happen from the government shutdown and the banks that are trying to um, they're selling good assets to get quick money because they don't have enough money in the system because already of the people that are not getting paid in the government shutdown. You add on top of that the people that are not going to get the SNAP benefits, and people love to say, oh, well, that's just poor people. No, 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 no. And we should care about the poor. It's just, this is crazy to me how people just get a political side and they can't see straight anymore. Um, for every $1 of SNAP, it is $1.50 that goes into the economy. So just think about that alone is a domino. And then you add on to that grocery stores that aren't going to get the amount of money that they normally would. This is a domino that goes through the economy. You look at the airports that are slowing down and are having lots of these cancellations and things because people aren't getting paid and they're calling in sick. There are this domino effect that's going to further hurt the economy when already they're trying to tank the US dollar under the table. So it's all going to happen without people realizing just how bad it's getting. That's why a lot of the stuff with the banks, you're not hearing about it because they want to do it quietly. So, but hey, what do you expect the end to look like, right? God told us what the end would look like. And the enemy has been preparing for this. So, the very first president of the UN General Assembly said this famous quote, just telling us how the enemy is chopping at the bit for this. What we want is a man of sufficient stature to hold the allegiance of all people and to lift us out of the economic morass in which we're sinking. Now, this is years ago. We just had what, the 80th General Assembly? So send us such a man, be he God or devil, and we'll receive him. Yeah, they will. That's their plan. And then this is King Charles when he was just lowly Prince Charles a few years back. And we know that this is talking about the one world government, basically the Antichrist rule. We know that this will take trillions, not billions of our dollars, with the true wealth at his disposal, far beyond the global GDP, and with the greatest respect beyond even the governors of the world's leaders. It offers the only real prospect for achieving fundamental economic transition. And that is the goal, because in order to control the world, you've got to control the economy. You have to control, just like God said they would, it buying and selling. You cannot buy or sell without the mark. So they got to that's what they're working on right now, is getting the world to that place. But first, before the mark, the world is going to be consolidated into 10 kings that will then bring all their power behind the Antichrist. And so these will rule when the Antichrist rules. So these come into power at the same time as the Antichrist and will give their power over to him. So this seems to be a reaction to something happening on the world stage. So it could be this financial break. Because understand, what's happening in America isn't in a silo. This is a global economic collapse that we're witnessing happening. Whether they're going to do this really fast, like what it looks like right now, or whether they're going to slow down and it'll be a slow bleed until after the rapture, we still have to wait and see. But something is going to happen, and it could be the rapture, that allows that quick put together of these 10 kings because they come to power along with the Antichrist. So Revelation 17:12 through 13. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but will receive 1 hour of authority as kings along with the beast. So this happens at the same time. These kings have one purpose: to yield their power and authority to the beast. And we already see from the slide ahead before this, we already see that's already in their heart. And the 10 horns are 10 kings who will rise from this kingdom. After them, another king, different from the earlier ones, will arise and subdue 3 kings. Daniel 7:24. So it's talking about the same 10. And then Daniel 2, 41 through 42. And just as you saw that the feet and toes were made partly of fiery clay and partly of iron, so this will be a divided kingdom. Some of the strength of iron will be in it, just as you saw the mixed clay with the some is iron mixed with clay, and also the toes and the feet will be partly iron and partly clay. So this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. So the world stage is racing toward this right now, preparing the infrastructure to implement this crushing control once the catalyst happens. They'll have their infrastructure in place for the mark, for this complete control. They've got to get their ducks in a row beforehand because think about this. This is just 7 years and they have to have the mark ready to go by the midpoint of that time. So this is a very short period of time to really do a lot. And we see the rise of blockchain that's connected to your biochemistry. So we see blockchain and digital tracing program. They're currently setting the stage for the coming mark of the beast and the ability of the Antichrist to control the world. And we've talked about this before too, because it's not just control what you buy or sell, but it's also controlling you, your mind, your ability. It's a way for him to actually get inside of people through this mark. So the Bible hints at the order of these events that are going to lead to it with the four horsemen. The first one is conquest. You know, the beast is going to come in through peace and policy. And what do you see right now? The whole world is chopping at the bit for peace, even when everything is actually war, which is crazy. But everybody's saying peace, peace when there is no peace and policy. So Daniel 8:25 talks about the man of sin, talks about the Antichrist. And through his policy, also he will cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. So you see that peace here is this lie, this hook that is going to be used to destroy people. He shall also stand up against the Prince of Pieces, the Prince of Princes, which of course is Jesus, but he shall be broken without hand. Remember when we looked at the statue from Daniel, and it's that rock that's formed without hand that destroys him? That's what that's talking about. So we see this first is conquest. We see it's all about peace. But this peace is destroying people. Right now, some of Trump's top officials are moving into military bases because of people are rising up. People are getting angry because of the things that are happening. And so we see this farce, this eternal, everlasting peace. It's very interesting the wording that they use of this, of course, is only Jesus that would do this, but it's like they're poking at the eye. And I just wonder, you know, I mean, it's how much mockery are people just going to deal with until they wake up? You know, you're just being mocked. So, but we see here, um, this meeting here, and it's interesting, and I don't fully know what to make of it. I understand, this peace, calling it eternal and calling it everlasting peace when it comes to Israel, because that's like the direct kind of poke God in the eye that, you know, um, eternal peace, everlasting peace before Jesus. But the only other mention of everlasting peace and eternal peace is with China, which is kind of interesting. So, but we have here these boast for everlasting or eternal peace. And so that's the first, this the conquest, this desire for peace is going to then push in to war. And we already see that too. It's with all this talk about peace, but there is so much war bubbling. China and Russia are talking about sending weapons to defend against America. Here Russia just tested doomsday nuclear weapons. They're testing was a tsunami, a radioactive tsunami that could hit the United States. We're starting our nuclear testing again for the first time in 33 years. Don't think 33 isn't significant because it is. Everything they do is in codes. And so we see here the conquest through policy and false peace. And then immediately, that next horse is war, war breaking out. And then the next horse is the dark horse. And this we see, I think we're seeing a lot of the shadows of this right now. We're seeing how the dark horse being egged on by the conquest, these policies that are crippling, and then the war that is further crippling and killing people, and then the dark horse where this is more economic collapse, famines, all these things are going to further push people into the beast system and into either you take the mark or you die. And so we're seeing this continue to really build, and we're seeing shadows of that coming into place, even right now. And so this is really something that we need to be aware of and be praying about because I don't think we're really aware of how much trouble our nation is in right now. But because again, I don't think we understand just how important the SNAP benefits are for everyday life in America. That's 42 million people. And now, I don't know, Trump just said he's not going to pay it all on it, but earlier he agreed that they would pay um they'd pay 50%, which this is interesting because they're saying that they would do 50%, but it could take weeks or months for that money to get to the people. And again, we talked about this is a domino. This is a domino that affects the entire economy. And you've got people rushing into food banks. And I don't know that people understand this, but the food banks already at the first of the year had their funding cut severely. On top of that, because of grocery prices and the inflation that has by no means gone down, that's ridiculous. It's just continued to go up. You go to the grocery store and you see that every single week. The food banks have really been hurting because their funding was cut and then everything cost more. And now they're being overrun already by people coming trying to get food. And so this is gonna domino. And then you've got people that like you and I who are having to stretch our budgets every single week because everything's getting more expensive on top of that. And then it looks like with this domino, everything is going to continue to get more expensive because groceries are going to have to go up to cover for the missing revenue. And what we're looking at is a perfect storm that is not by accident. So it's really up to them if they're like, this is the pain and this is the time to do this to crash the economy, or if they're going to pull this back. So we'll just see. But I really, people pray, have compassion because people are really scared. We've got government workers who are continuing to work, but they're not getting paid. And they have no relief in sight. And even though they're being told that they'll get back pay, they haven't gotten back pay and they still have to pay their bills. And so this is a domino effect that is affecting people, and this is real. People are really suffering and they're really getting scared. And so this is all going to the place though. This is what do we expect the end to look like? God told us. that the enemy would have complete control and he would crush everything. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing this beast system crushing everything. And, they told us you'll own nothing, but you'll be happy. Well, we'll own nothing, but the beast will be happy. So here we're seeing again, many people are losing their jobs right now. AI is a huge cut, and also because of the economy, people are backing up. People are not spending as much money as they had. That's already happening. People are not going to spend as much money on Christmas this year as they had before. All of that feeds the local economy. And so, of course, they're coming out saying, we've got the answer. Elon Musk is all over this. Um, is a nationwide basic income. And he even says it's high income. So they're trying to prep the the mindset here that people are going to be desperate. They're going to want a nationwide basic income to help them meet their needs. And this is a perfect setup for the mark of the beast. Because in order to be part of this economy, you're going to need to play by the economy's rules. You will not be able to buy or sell unless you do that. And so this brings us to the last horseman, which is the pale horse of death and hell. And I do think it's interesting, just that phrase kind of jumped out at me because we've been seeing it everywhere with Isaiah 28. I just keep seeing the covenant with death and hell. And here, the last beast, the last horseman is the pale horse of death with hell following. And so the only way, out of this, you've got the war, the famine, people are going to die. The only way out of the tribulation is either die to yourself, receive Jesus as your Savior, and the majority will be the majority of those that do that will be martyred, or temporary relief by receiving the mark of the beast. And then you are dying. You're going to hell. And so hell, I just think that's very interesting, that kind of word there. But here you've got death, all these things coming forward. And, we see by the end of the tribulation period, the vast majority of mankind will be destroyed. And if Jesus doesn't come back just when he does, he says there'll be no flesh saved. And, that could be related to the mark because the mark does change people. But that's also going to be, he comes in just in the nick of time to save Israel and to save those that have survived the tribulation without dying yet. So, um, it's interesting to see kind of the progression of those things and all that control that the enemy is working on right now. We see the pictures of it. But there's going to be a great delusion um, associated with the rapture. And I think that's why we're seeing more and more of this UFO stuff. And, used to, it would sound crazy talking about that the rapture might be explained away by a UFO. But now, the news is already prepping you for that. The news is already prepping you for a UFO. You're already hearing about Three-Eye Atlas and you're already hearing about UFOs and the strange drones and interstellar objects and thousands of underwater objects and UFOs in the oceans. And so it's very interesting. We're hearing these stories, these news, these footage that's being leaked out, and government officials just saying yes, that there are, other life forms, and so they're just coming right out and talking about it, but they're doing it in a way that's low key enough to where it's there in the subconscious for them to pull it forward when they need to. So the final thought here is, we're looking at these contractions. We've looked at these contractions. We're measuring our contraction. We're We're timing them to see that we're in transition. We are so close to having that baby born. But what is sandwiched between the tribulation? And what is the tribulation sandwich between, I should say? Well, first is the rapture. We see the tribulation this clearly. The rapture comes first. And then after the tribulation, Jesus returns and we return with him to set up his millennial reign, where we rule and we reign by his side, and we get to witness him give Israel all the promises that he gave her throughout scripture. We get to witness that all unfold. And so we really do have so much to look forward to. And so I know it's frustrating living at this time in history where, just like the mom that's pacing because, man, this baby's coming and it hurts. It's very uncomfortable and downright painful. And childbirth is traumatic, okay? It is pain that is trauma pain, but it turns into joy and it turns into something beautiful because it is pain with a purpose. A baby is being born. And so right now we're timing these contractions and they hurt. And this is scary. This is trauma pain. But if you know Jesus, it's pain for a purpose. And so I just pray, if you do not know that you know that you know the Jesus of the Bible, know him. Don't let that go to chance. And your salvation is in him and him alone. You don't do anything to help him save you. It's just the finished work of Jesus. So I hope you guys were encouraged, and share the gospel this week. Tell somebody what's happening. And God willing, I'll see you next week. God bless you.